Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. This is going to be the start of a multi-part series where we dive in and I show you guys a little bit of a behind the scenes look into what a trading day looks like and how I actually set up trades on a higher time frame perspective here. Now you'll notice that Bitcoin has made it back to this $109,000 level that we've discussed on the channel for over a week now, and that we can see Bitcoin has wicked below that level in the last 4 hours and has bounced back above, and it looks like we are finding support here. Now, the purpose of this video is to scale into trades on a lot of the altcoins that we're looking at, and I'll show you guys how I actually scale into these trades, the levels that I'm looking at to enter, why I'm entering these trades, invalidation levels and where I'd get stopped out if I think that the trade's no longer viable, and essentially how I'm planning to trade the next 40 days in the cryptocurrency market. So very big video today, very informative. It will be released in one part so you'll be able to watch it all through, but without further ado, let's jump into it. So the way I start and have a look at these higher time frame trades that I usually enter, and I only enter a few of them each year, but it all starts with my higher time frame perspective here. Now I have two higher time frame narratives that I'm looking for. The first was simply just Bitcoin back testing the all-time high set back on the 20th of January, and that once Bitcoin does back test this, no matter how high it goes, I'm not really interested in it. I am looking for it to match the M2 money supply, and this is the M2 money supply here in blue, and it does have Bitcoin sitting at $155,000 to about $160,000 if Bitcoin is to continue to follow the M2, which it has so far in this cycle, and I do think it will continue to do so. Right now we are just at a pit stop like this where you can see the M2 pulled back, stalled out before it then continued and went on for that parabolic move, and what I think so far from what we can see has topped out up here. And I think Bitcoin is in a similar move like that right now, where we can see Bitcoin is just backtesting the all-time high, and what comes next is what we have drawn out here in blue, which is my take on how I see the M2 money supply playing out over the course of the next month or so. Now there is one different scenario in how I see Bitcoin playing out, and it ties back to the fact that we have just been repeating the entire cycle. As you can see, we had our two tops back here at the height of 2021, we went into this long bear market, breached the highs, ABC correction, and that's the entire market cycle. Then if we scroll over here and have a look at how things played out, we've seen a very similar thing play out. Price shoots to the upside, we have those two highs just like we had back in 2021. Price goes down, bear market, sweeps the highs, ABC correction, and that's the second market cycle that we've seen so far. And that would point to us being in a similar situation now where we should start to see that market cycle repeat. And the way that that's played out in the past is these two peaks like we've seen back here, these two peaks, and then eventually Bitcoin grinds down, finds support, sets this ugly triple low before it eventually bottoms out, and then we see price move back to the upside, ABC correction, and then go from there. And if we are in something like that right now, obviously it would be on a much smaller time scale. I would assume that this would be a low, this would be the second low we're seeing, and maybe if we were following that structure, we should see a third low on Bitcoin at about 105,000 before it can then V bottom out like it did here and then push back to the highs real fast, ABC correct, which does line up with what we see on the M2 money supply. The big decision I'm making right now on how I'm trading the market is if we end up seeing that third low on Bitcoin, or if structurally just backtesting the all-time high back from January is good enough for Bitcoin to move up. Now, I'm not actually interested in buying Bitcoin or trading Bitcoin. I'm just using it as a guideline for how I'm judging the rest of the market. What I'm really interested in is the altcoins, because if we have a look at a lot of altcoins, and I'm not going to use Ethereum because as we've seen over the course of August, Ethereum has rallied upwards of 50% and made it back to its previous highs, which we can see on the higher time frame here. You can see that Ethereum is now back at its all-time high. And typically what we've seen in the past when Ethereum has made it back to its all-time high, like we can see over here, this is the 2018 to 2021 cycle. You can see big bear market, Ethereum makes it back to its all-time high, and we do start to see this real washing machine choppy price action. And right now what I think we're actually in for Ethereum is this pullback right here. I think we've seen the initial pullback, the rejection before tapping the all-time high, then we've come up, tapped through the all-time high, and now we are pulling back in a moment like this, like we seen in January of 2021, which then led Ethereum to surge from about $1,000 as high as about $4,300. But what was really clear in this final surge for Ethereum, once it broke out from this high, which you can see is in this black line here, is it's a very clear 5-wave structure. There's a final 5-wave structure in the final 5th wave, and then in the final 5th wave, right up the top here, there is another final 5-wave structure to finish it off. Now, we're well away from this actually happening, so I'm not going to dive into that this video. That is how we are going to identify tops on a lot of these coins, especially Ethereum. Right now, I do think we are in this stage here where we are rejecting from the all-time high. And if we scroll back to how Ethereum is performing right now, you can see that a little clearer, keeping that image in mind that we just seen as Ethereum rejected just briefly before the all-time high here. Now it's come up and tapped the all-time high. It's made it back to this support region that we were looking for Ethereum to backtest. And what we should see next from this level is what we have mapped out in the blue here, where Ethereum pushes back to the highs, consolidates, breakout, backtest, 5-wave parabola. And that ends up finishing off Ethereum. And if we have a look at the Bitcoin dominance, you can see that the Bitcoin dominance is in free fall here. And I do believe that we are in the process of an alt season right now. However, because we have negative price action on Bitcoin, the altcoins are just holding up better against Bitcoin. But what that typically means is that capital is flowing out of Bitcoin and flowing into the altcoins, hence the fact that they're holding up better while Bitcoin is selling off. And just recently, yesterday, we seen someone sell about 2,000 Bitcoin, which ended up giving us this initial crash on Bitcoin, which then got bought back up. And we can see that on the lower time frames here, as you can see that this big red candle here on Bitcoin was just one whale, which we've now found out that they ended up selling all of that Bitcoin, converting it to US dollars and buying Ethereum with that. So we can see that bigger whales are actually accumulating these altcoins and preparing for a move like this on Ethereum, which is similar to what we've seen back in 2021, which we can also see here as the Bitcoin dominance has been falling. A lot of money is clearly moving out of Bitcoin, but where is it moving? Yesterday, we got a pretty good indicator that this big sell here ended up all going into Ethereum. So I'm assuming that a lot of the money is rotating into the altcoins right now. And that once we start to see some positive price action on Bitcoin, we'll start to see some even more positive price action on these altcoins. But assuming that this $109,000 level holds here for Bitcoin, this is where we will start to scale in for a lot of our trades. So let's jump into that now and have a look at the trades that we're going to start to scale into. And I'll go over where my invalidation levels are for a lot of these coins. I will be doing about 5 or 7 that I think will go between 300 to 600% higher during the coming bull market. And I'm going to show you guys where we scale into these coins, where we have our stop losses, where our invalidation levels are essentially, and where we're looking for to take profit. So guys, we're over here on my trading platform, and what we can see is that the first coin we want to start with is actually XRP. Now you guys can see that this green line represented here is where I've actually already started to enter in XRP. And now we're going to jump over to trading view so I can show you guys on a higher time frame what my entry model and my plan is essentially for XRP here. Now, if we move over to XRP, we can see that on the higher time frames here, XRP has broken out from this mid-cycle correction that it's been into, set new highs, and we are in this stage now where we are simply just consolidating before I think we can build a bit of momentum and break to the upside. And then I think as far as targets go for XRP, I am looking for a full extension of this mid-cycle correction here, which we've seen in the past. We've seen on coins like Litecoin. I've shown plenty of examples on the channel, and that does take us to those top targets that we have marked out here conveniently in the purple box, which is a full extension of the mid-cycle correction, and that gets us to about $9.17. So personally, I'll be starting to take profits once we clear this 3.618, which is at about $8. I'm expecting price will shoot up here, and there'll be a lot of excitement, a lot of euphoria. We'll probably peak higher. I'll see something like this. But ultimately, once price gets above $9.70, that's where I'll be taking the majority of the position out. And if we do see like 10 or 11 or $12 XRP, I don't really care. I'll still have a little bit in the trade and scale out as price goes higher, but the majority of my price targets will be based around this fib extension. Now, moving into lower time frames on XRP, what we can see is that we've been in this consolidation range here. And right now, what I'm looking at for XRP is a potential back test of $2.66 here, which is the range high in the worst case scenario. So if XRP at any point gets below $2.66 and we don't start to see price shoot back to the upside and it just starts to look bad from there and we start to see weak signals on Bitcoin, then I will essentially be out of any trades and look to start offloading some spot XRP, as that could potentially be an early warning sign that we are at the end of this market cycle and that my thesis here isn't going to end up playing out. So this is essentially my line in the sand where I see XRP getting to, and we could wick below it in a really oversold environment where there's there's a lot of negative news, but I just don't see that happening. So this red line down here, 266, is my line in the sand for XRP. So 266 won't be where I place my stop loss for this trade, but this will be my line in the sand for where I will start to make much bigger decisions as far as my spot positions go for XRP, especially if we see closes below and we don't see price V bottom back above this in a situation like that. But on lower time frames here, if we move in on the half an hour, what we can see is that XRP got pumped with the rest of the market when Jerome Powell came out and said that they are considering cutting rates, and since then the market's taken that all back. However, what's interesting to me on XRP here is that it does look like we are forming some kind of head and shoulders in an inverse perspective, and this area here is where I'd be looking to scale in more XRP. I don't think we're going to sweep these lows, especially if Bitcoin holds 109,000. And right now what I'm looking for is, you can see back here on my trading platform that I've already started to scale in here at about $2.86 is my entry. My stop loss is down here at about $2.81. But moving into a higher time frame perspective, I don't see these lows getting swept here on XRP. So this is where I will be moving my stop to, because if XRP is to sweep this low, I would assume that Bitcoin is going to take out $109,000, and then I'll have to reevaluate my entry positions. And I think that the worst case we could see on XRP here, like we've seen on TradingView, is to match that low, which you can see if we flick back to TradingView, represented by this black line, is just a little bit lower. So I think in a worst case scenario, what we could see is price grind up here and then some flash liquidation candle, V bottom out of here, price recovers, and then we can see XRP move on higher with the rest of the market. This is something I can also see playing out potentially, hence why I have moved my stop loss down below $2.78 here. And in the event that that ends up happening, I will add to this XRP position, but currently we only have 3,476 XRP in the trade, so just a small bite so far. And if we start to see follow through, which is why this is going to be a multi-part series, then I'll continue to add. But so far so good, happy with where it's bounced. I would like to see a bit of a liquidating candle here, especially on the hourly, kind of like we've seen down here at the lows or at these lows here. So I'll be keeping my eye out for something like that where I can scale in more and add to my XRP position. And now we'll move on to the next coin, and the next coin I do plan on trading here is actually Ethereum. And I think from these levels, we should see Ethereum rally like it did back in 2021. And if you remember, like we touched on earlier in the video, ETH went from about $1,400 to about $4,300 here, which is like a 3x, which is about a 200% gain. And I think in today's market cycle, we could see something similar like that play out on Ethereum. But the way I'm judging the top on Ethereum is that 5-wave structure. So I'll be looking for Ethereum to get to about $10,000. However, structurally, as far as entering the trades, I do think this is a great level to enter. You can see that we have come back to this mid-range here, and I think ETH will find support and bounce from this level, and at no point do I think we should sweep the lows here at about 4,084. And if we do sweep the lows down here at about 4,000 and 4,063, 4,059, if ETH does sweep those lows, I'll be looking for a bounce here. And if we do see ETH bounce on this level, then that's another area that I'll be looking to enter a trade. But right now, the trade for me is to enter ETH these positions, stop losses at the lows, and we'll be targeting that price area of about $10,000 over the coming 30 days. So right now this is over a 15 risk to reward trade, which means I could take this trade about 15 times, lose, and if I won on the 16th entry, then I would break even. So massive R&R here. I am expecting ETH to hold here and push higher. However, this black line down here, which is the top of this consolidation range, will be the next level I'd look to enter if my trade gets stopped out here. So moving over to Ethereum here on our trading platform, we are going to look to start to scale in ETH entries here. Our stop loss here is about 4,066, which is the lows that we can see down here. So we're going to punch that in as our stop loss. So right now, as far as this trade goes, I am looking to risk roughly $200, as I do think there's a chance we could see price just wick a little bit lower and I could get a better entry. So just to enter this trade until we see a bit more confirmation and follow through, I am looking to risk about $180 to $200. So we will start with just half an Ethereum here. And if we do see price move lower, we will continue to add in, increase the trade. But right now, based on my trading bias, this is the most I'm willing to risk. But let's move into the next coin. Now, the next coin we have here is actually ADA Cardano. And if we have a look at ADA on higher time frames here, what I can see is that we had an initial pump late last year, which is the first move of the cycle, and since then we have seen ADA correct at its lows about 61%. And what I think we're going into next is the next stage of the bull market. And if we want to have a look and compare how that played out last time for ADA, we can just simply go back to here in 2020, where you can see that off the lows, this is clearly the first move of the bull market, seeing ADA rally as high as 760%. Then goes into this corrective phase. We see price explode to the upside once it breaks out of this corrective structure here. Then we see that violent back test, then a bit of consolidation before ADA eventually surges higher and goes for that parabolic bull run. Now, if we come back and have a look at today's price structure, I do think we are in something quite similar to that, where we have had this initial move, price surge as high as 300%, about half of what we've seen back in 2020. We've gone through this mid-cycle correction, which I believe is just this entire phase here, similar corrective phase, and now we are in a situation where we are working to actually get out of that. And if we move into lower timeframes here on ADA, we'll start with the hourly first. What we can see is that the level we were looking to enter was the top of this range here. And that what's nice here is that we also have a low on ADA set back on the 22nd of August, which we can use as a stop loss, as if, again, Bitcoin does hold this $109,000 level, there is no reason why ADA should go down and take out about 82 cents, with our entry level being the top of these two heights at the consolidation range. So what that trade looks like, if we are to enter in right here at these levels, would be a stop loss down here, and we would be targeting quite high on ADA, potentially the old all-time high, which if we move into higher time frames, we can see is much higher from where ADA is right now. I don't know if it'll make it back to that all-time high. I'll have to assess on the rest of the market. The best thing I can go off is a fib extension here. And if we move into the higher timeframes, I could see ADA taking out that previous high if it has a really good run here, which would take our long trade to about a 270%, potentially 300% gain, especially if we do sweep the high set back in 2021. I would most likely be targeting this 3.618 and not a full extension like we are on XRP, because ADA's chart is very different. It hasn't broken out from its all-time high. It's not consolidating up here at the heights like XRP is. It's actually performing quite different from a lot of the coins that we're looking at. So even if it was to make it back to its all-time high, I do think that would be a pretty good move. Now, if we jump back into lower time frames and have a look at this trade that we've marked out here, what we can see is this is essentially the trade, which is just a massive upside here with very minimal downside risk. Essentially, we're looking at 120 RNR trade. I am looking to risk about $200 on this trade again. So moving over to our trading platform, that would put our stop loss here at about 82 cents, which we already have our stop set at these levels. Roughly right now, we're risking about $133. You can see we're already entered in the trade with about 6,000 ADA. And I think for the time being right now, I do want to increase that just a little bit until we can see some follow through, especially on Bitcoin. More of a confirmation that the low's in, similar to the way we're trading Ethereum. So we will risk about $155 here on ADA. And we will be looking to add and scale into this position as we see price move higher. Now, moving into the next coin, which is actually Dogecoin, is one of the coins that I am the most bullish on here, and we're going to have a look at this on TradingView, and I'll show you guys why I'm actually so bullish on Doge. So looking at Doge on higher time frames, I've discussed this a lot on the channel. I do think it is setting up scarily similar to the way it did back in October and November of last year before it ended up going on this parabolic run, which, as you can see up the top here, was a 368% gain over the course of just 43 days for Dogecoin, which is roughly how long I do think we have in the cycle. But what's most interesting to me is the way Dogecoin actually gave us this bottom down here at the lows, where you can see back in October of last year, we had the big flush. We've seen the lows, price shot back up, and then we never seen those lows get taken out again. It was very close to actually taking out the lows here. However, these lows ended up holding, which then marked the local bottom before we seen price move to the upside. Now, if we have a look at how Doge is performing today, I do believe that this is quite similar and that the lows that shouldn't get taken out are here. And what we've seen is price move up. And what I'd likely expect is price to move back down like it has been so far, but essentially hold this zone. I don't think Doge at any point should take out this area. And I believe that if it does hold these lows, and it will continue to play out like it did in October and November of last year, surge another 300 to 400%. So my trading setup here for Doge does involve a bigger stop loss here. We don't want to see price get down below about 18 cents. And again, the targets for this would definitely be the highs being taken out here of about 48 cents. And if we grab a fib tool on these levels, you can see that again, that 3.618, which gets us the sweep of the highs, is where I'll be targeting on Doge at about 54 cents here. So if we move up our long position to about 54 cents, that does get us the sweep of the highs. That does get us a gain from current price levels of about 160%. So I definitely think Doge can go higher. However, this is where I'll be looking to initially start to take profit. And as you can see, we've actually entered this position about 2 hours ago. If we actually come over to TradingView and have a look at Doge on lower time frames, I think the most likely area to place our stops at is about 19 cents. So we'll move our stop losses up to about 19.6, which takes our total risk to about $240, which I am happy for Doge. So we will adjust our trading position as we have entered roughly here, and this is our stop loss now, making it a 22, almost 23 R&R trade, which I am pretty happy with. Now, if we move over to the next coin on the list, this is actually Solana, which I think will perform very well in the short term, as I can see that as far as structures go, Solana is one of the most bullish in the last 24 hours. It actually took out the high before rejecting down with Bitcoin and the rest of the market. But what we can see here is that the channel Solana is simply forming, tends to lead to pretty bullish price action. If we have a look at this on a higher time frame, you can see that Solana has had a very interesting run, a very aggressive bear market, selling off as low as about 96% before pushing about 3,500% from the lows set back in 2022 with the FTX collapse. And since then, we've seen price pull back about 68%. So as far as price targets for Solana, I'm not too sure how high it's going to run. I think it's definitely going to be an in-the-moment kind of decision, and we are going to do wave counts, and we're going to combine that with how things are playing out on the fibs here. I don't know if we will see $1,000 Solana. I think $823 is 3618 level makes sense to me, which from current price levels is about a 333% price increase, which does sound reasonable considering how high Solana actually shot from the lows here. So if $823 is our first initial take profit target. Now moving on to the 4-hour time frame here for Solana, I do like this level it's holding. This is the area that Sol actually found support before it pushed up as high as $300 before then rejecting back down, finding resistance against this level, breaking through, failing to find support here, finding support once but then breaking through again, and we've seen it find support here again. So I do expect Solana will find support in this level, and at no point do I think Solana should go below $177 down here, and it's most likely what we see on Sol is a bounce off the trend in the worst case scenario before we can then see it move higher. So if we draw up our trading position here, let's say we're to enter price right now, we shouldn't see price get below the lows here, and we will be targeting about $850 like we discussed earlier, which gets us to about here on Solana. So pretty massive trade. Again, like the rest, we're not risking that much. That's why I believe that the opportunity we're going into right now is so crazy, as we don't really have to risk that much on the trades. And as we can see, there's a 56 R&R here on this trade. But assuming that Bitcoin holds, this low should probably hold for Solana. This low down here at 177 should also hold, so we will put our stop loss just a little bit lower. Moving over to our trading platform here, you can see that we are already in the Solana trade. We did enter about an hour or two ago. And right now we will adjust our stop losses here, how much we're willing to risk based on what we've just charted out here. And you can see that the lows at about $177 is where I think the stop loss should be, which is just a sweep of this low. And I don't think at any point price should get down there, especially if Bitcoin holds at 109 here. So you can see that's about a $242 risk, which I am pretty happy to risk on Sol, as I do think it will perform quite well, especially in the short term, as we've seen a lot of strength come out of it recently. So I'm not looking to add anything into this position yet. If we do see a situation like discussed on XRP where price moves higher, sweeps the lows, I will add more Solana. But for right now, this is the trade. I'm pretty happy with it, pretty happy with the risk. Potentially, if I wanted to be more conservative, I could move the stop loss higher, as I don't even think that these lows here at 185 should get taken unless we do see a flash wick to the downside. But most likely Sol should hold these lows here, could even move the stop loss to about these levels here, as I don't see a reason why price should make it down below $180. So we'll adjust that here on TradingView, and that will bring our risk to about $191. So pretty happy with that there on Solana. Let's move into the next trade. So the final coin for today that we're going to be entering trades into is HBAR. And if we have a look at HBAR on a higher time frame, I like this chart a lot. You can see we have pulled back, found support twice on the bear market highs, which was set back here in March of 2024. And you can see that price has moved up quite aggressively from these lows, is going into what I believe is just a bull flag simply here for HBAR. And once it does break out from this bull flag, you can draw it however you want. I think it's just a channel moving to the downside. I think we are at a good support region. You can see that we've held here multiple times. If price was to break down below these support regions and take out the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lows that it's set down here at these levels now, I would expect price to move down quite a fair bit lower, quite aggressively. So even though we have set a lower high here, I do think price will hold this time and move higher, as we do have a bullish outlook here for the rest of the market. And again, assuming Bitcoin holds 109, most likely the H bar will also hold this level like it has 5 times before and move higher. So as far as stop losses go, I think it's pretty clear that we can most likely put our stop loss at about 22 cents down here at this low here for H bar. So if we draw that up, that's most likely going to be our entry at where price is right now. Stop loss just below this low here, as I don't think that should get taken out. And as far as higher time frame targets go on H bar, I am looking at minimum for it to make it back to these highs set back in 2021 here. So I think the first target we'll be looking for is about 47 cents. Most likely we'll go higher, but this is where we will be looking for our first take profit. So this on the higher time frames will be the trade drawn up. If we move into the lower time frames just to have a look at how all of that looks, so I am pretty happy with the setup. Assuming that Bitcoin holds its low, I don't see why H bar shouldn't hold, and you can see that just on the hourly time frame here, we've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pretty strong hourly candles, and that we would expect H bar to pull back at some point, maybe even double bounce off these lows, but it should move higher, and that most likely will be the confirmed low. So I'm happy with the stop loss, I'm happy with the take profit. And now, considering that it's most likely we do see a short-term pullback here, I'm going to start to scale into the trade just a little bit, probably only risk $100 here, because I will be looking to add in over the next couple of hours, as price will most likely just backtest, considering it is at a resistance region here. As you can see, this is the low from the range that it broke down from. So moving over to our trading platform now, assessing what we see here on H bar, this should be our low roughly down here. So we will put that in as our stop loss. We don't have a position yet, and we haven't started scaling into anything. So I think roughly from what I can see right now, I am looking to only risk $100 because I am expecting H bar to pull back at least to these levels, and I'll enter some more. So I think roughly if we go for about 10,000 H bar, yeah, that should be about $94, and that's where we'll enter this position here. So guys, if we scroll down and have a look, you can see that we have all 6 positions. The XRP one obviously being the one that's performing the best so far, up about 10%. Our smallest position is actually Ethereum, which makes sense as we do have the largest stop loss on ETH, but I'm pretty happy with this as the first initial scaling in phase on the trades to come over the next 40 days. And that once we do see price move higher, more confirmation that this is the low for Bitcoin, I will feel much more confident about adding to a lot of these trades. So for me, essentially what I want to see is the V bottom back above 112, consolidation, I'll add more. Maybe if we see a pullback down to these levels, I want to see 110 hold. I definitely want to see 110, 200 hold. And then I want to see Bitcoin move higher, get back to the 114, get back to the 115, and then make it back to my first area of confidence, which sits here at about $118,000. So this is the first part of the series, guys. You can see it is the 26th of August today, and I do think that the low is in for Bitcoin. Worst case scenario, you see one more flash to the downside. I do think a lot of the trades will be safe if we do see one more wick to the downside. Maybe some that I've got really tight stop losses on, like H bar, for example, might struggle here if we do see that happen. However, considering the move that we've had up so far in comparison to Bitcoin here, I think that H bar will end up holding these lows ultimately and hold the lows set back here on the 3rd of August if we do see Bitcoin just wick down one more time before it actually confirms that low. So this is the trades that we have so far here on the channel. Day 1, I'll keep you guys updated on how this plays out, and I'll see you guys in the next clip. Alright, so it is now the second part of this video. It's been 24 hours since the last recording, and as we can see, price has developed quite a little bit in the last 24 hours. We've seen Bitcoin shoot to the upside back to this $112,000 resistance level, which is the initial area I am expecting Bitcoin to struggle at. As we can see, if we zoom out here, we've found resistance here in the past, we've found support on this level, we've found support on this level, we've struggled to break down through this level, which eventually we did break down through, and now we're finding resistance here, which is to be expected. So moving forward here on Bitcoin, I'm not 100% confident that we have the $109,000 bottom in yet, but I am liking the way a lot of this is playing out. So let's have a look at the altcoins and see how they're all tracking along. Firstly, we'll start with the Ethereum trade. As we can see, the Ethereum trade is playing out pretty well. We're up a little bit here. If we come over to the trading page here, we can see that from our entry here, we are up a little bit. Nothing I'm too excited about yet. And overall, what I'm looking for play out here on Ethereum is for ETH to clear this level here, and then once that height gets cleared, I'll be looking to add a little bit more, but in the short term expecting price to actually pull back most likely to where our entry level is, and if that ends up holding, I will even add a little bit more Ethereum in that position. But so far what we can see is pretty nice bounce off our entry level, and we're happy with how this is playing out. Now if we move over to our second trade here, it's actually XRP, and XRP has been one of our favorite performers. If we have a look at Ethereum here, it is deep in this structure here, hasn't really shown too many signs that are convincing me it's going to break to the upside just yet. But if we do look at XRP, we can see that the push is much better, and it has been performing quite well over the last 24 hours. If we flick over to the trade, you can see that the trade's playing out quite well. We are going to leave the stop loss where it is down here at the lows at our invalidation level. And yes, I did close out half the trade because I only wanted to risk $150 with such a tight stop loss, but we will be looking to add more XRP as price continues to pull back here. So we'll dive into Bitcoin now before we go in and have a look at the rest of the coins that we have opened up in the trade here. As you guys can see, they are all in profit. They're all doing pretty well so far. XRP is definitely the winner. Dogecoin's up there. The ADA trade is up there. And the Solana trade has actually picked up quite well in the last hour or so. So we will jump into that later on. Let's just quickly jump back to Bitcoin, have a look at the way this structure can develop from here. And just staying on the hourly time frame here, what I'm most likely expecting is a little ABC correction, most likely something like this. I'm hoping Bitcoin finds support at this level. As you can see, it was quite a resistance level before we have broken to the upside, so it makes sense to retest that. If we take the drawings off the screen here and we grab our fib tool, just from this range, what we can see is that the 50% level, I'll zoom in a little bit so we can see it, the 50% level does also sit right at the top of this accumulation range. So taking that into consideration, I am looking to see Bitcoin backtest and bounce off these levels, and it wouldn't surprise me if we do see some kind of ABC down to these levels. And then what I want to see next is Bitcoin actually make it back to this $112,000 region, most likely to reject from there, maybe another 50% correction, which would take it back to this height, and then we should see price consolidate and break out. Now, we've seen Bitcoin play out like this in the past. This is quite a common bottoming structure, but to be completely honest, these structures can take many various shapes. We've even seen in the past Bitcoin come down from these levels, double bottom, teeter around with these lows before then just V-bottoming straight out. So if it wants to take shape like that, then that's good. We will add more to our position across a lot of our altcoins at the lows. But in the short term, we're just waiting for Bitcoin to give us a little bit more data, show us the structure it wants to actually put in here. And if we do end up seeing something like this, then I will be much more confident moving forward, as I have seen Bitcoin perform like this in the past multiple times. Even if we just have a look back to its previous lows, we've seen something quite similar where Bitcoin shot up to the resistance level, ABC, straight back down, find support on the lows, and then it's out, right? So we are looking for something quite similar to that. So that would be a structure I'm more familiar with, that I feel more comfortable seeing here on Bitcoin, but it can take various shapes. We may not even get the back test. It could just shoot higher. But what I'm looking for is two levels, essentially the back test we just discussed, or Bitcoin to move above this $112,000 level and use it as support again, like it has here and it has here. So depending on how all this wants to play out down here at the lows, when we do get the break above 112, if we can find it as support, that'll be a great entry level to add to the alts. So now moving over to the next coin, which is Solana, which has in the last couple hours actually been performing quite well. We've seen it shoot to the upside while a lot of the market's selling off, like we've seen on Bitcoin, like we've seen on Ethereum here a little bit, especially XRP's been selling off for the last 4 hours. Solana, which is one of the coins I had the highest hopes for, especially in the short term, as we've seen such strength in the way that it bounced back to the top of its range highs here. We are seeing Sol push higher here, show more of that strength that we've seen earlier, and hopefully this low ends up holding here for Solana, and we can see this trade work out quite well. If we move over to the actual trade, it is performing quite well, very small position size, but right now we are up more than we're risking. So very happy with how this is all playing out, and I definitely will be looking to add more Solana if we do start to see a pullback. Now, I won't go over the rest of the coins here because I don't want to take up too much time, but you can see on the Dogecoin trade, it is up quite well. The H-bar trade is playing out quite nicely, and that everything we're seeing here is working out, and that so far the local bottom we've seen on Bitcoin at 109,000 is holding firm right now. I just want to reiterate, I am not 100% confident right now from the way we've seen price react in the last 24 hours that this will be the low until we see Bitcoin cross back above that $112,000 level. So fingers crossed that we get a nice end to August. We see price surge up higher. I do think at some point there will be pretty steep corrections on the move back up. I don't think it will be as clean as I'd previously anticipated, expecting a V bottom just to shoot us back to this $118,000, $120,000 range. If Bitcoin wants to perform like that, I'll be very happy and I'll definitely be adding to my positions, but I do think it will be a little bit choppy down here at the lows, and I do think there will be some pretty steep pullbacks at some point, especially if we do see Bitcoin's price shoot up here. 100% I'm expecting it to come back for a 50% correction of that move at some point. And that just from the way this pullback's played out and a lot of the external things that I have access to that I'm looking at, this move has shaken out a lot of retail. The slow grind down, the big news pump that happened, which got everyone back in the market, and then the way that the market makers have flushed Bitcoin back to the downside, taking the profits from a lot of traders and altcoins, has really reset this market and shaken out a lot of retail. Even if we look back to Monday's video on the channel, another very simple indicator that a lot of people can use here is if you go and have a look at some of the YouTube channels you watch, what you should be having a look at is how many views their videos are getting. You can see that Monday's video, which I believe was one of my better videos, only got 88 views compared to the hundreds I was getting last week when the market was selling off. So even just using simple indicators like this, what we can see is that a lot of the crowd was in during this moment, and that now that we've seen price flush to the downside, most people aren't really paying as much attention to crypto, and there's clearly been a shift in sentiment, because who really wants to be here when the market is doing this? And that every single time we've seen price shoot up, a lot of leverage enters this market, and every time it gets swept out, the amount of leverage in the volume we see doesn't enter back in at the lows. And we can see this quite clearly here if we have a look at the liquidation heat map. Since the lows were set back there at about $109,000 on the 26th, no long liquidity has entered. All the liquidity that's in this market right now that is likely to be taken out is to the upside. And if we zoom this out on a weekly time frame here, what you can see is that when Bitcoin's price pumped to the upside, look how much long liquidity ended up coming to the market, all to get wiped out by one big liquidating candle. But then what happened? All the liquidity entered back in as price was selling off, which you can see by this small yellow area here. But what's happened since price has actually bottomed and started moving to the upside is there is no yellow anymore. There is no new longs being added to the market. Nowhere near as much that was added back here once we've seen price shoot up on the interest rate news. Nothing like back here where people tried again once that level ended up bouncing from and then getting flushed. Right now, we haven't seen that. So it's quite clear that a lot of interest has been flushed out of the market, which is exactly what you want to see when it's time for them to shoot price to the upside. So another reason I'm hoping that this bottom will hold, and I'm quite confident that it will. However, I do want to address again that I'm not 100% confident that it will hold. And if we do see price shoot lower, then there is a lot of good entry levels for these altcoins. Like you can see that we have marked out here on Ethereum at about 4,200. This would be a pretty nice level to get an entry, or there's still the original entry price down here at about 3,900, but we probably won't get that if Bitcoin ends up holding here, and this is the bottom for Bitcoin. And there's a lot of traders that I talk to and watch, they're all looking for these same entry levels, so it's quite likely that we actually won't see price get down to that, or this entry level here that we discussed in yesterday's part of the video, where we said if we did see price get down to here, we would add more to our Ethereum trade. So guys, I'm going to put the first two parts of this video out today so that you can see a little bit of behind the scenes on what I'm looking at here on the charts, how I'm actually trading this, and that I'm not just coming here telling you that I think September is going to be one of the most bullish months for crypto. I put my money where my mouth is, and I truly believe that September is going to be amazing and it's going to be huge. It's just a matter of getting those entries in for a lot of trades. So guys, until the next one, I'll keep you updated on how all of this continues to play out, and we'll continue to track the trades on the channel and see how all of these perform over the next 30 to 40 days. If you enjoy this style of video, feel free to leave a like down below. If you're new here, you can also subscribe. And if you guys have any questions about anything we've discussed in today's video, I know it was a bit of a longer one, feel free to drop them down below in the comment section. And I'll see you guys in the next one.